Hello, dear friends, and welcome to our weekly program entitled The Spirit's Reports, the Spirit Study of the Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. What we do every Sunday evening at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, since we're located in California, we study the Spirit's teachings that we find in each and every chapter of the Gospel. It's always in the second part of the chapter where spirits come through, helping us understand the main chapters that Allan Kardec put together in the Gospel according to Spiritism. We're here in Northern California representing Divine Light Spiritist Group and Visaya Spiritual Healing Center. You can find us live on the YouTube channels of both of those centers, as well as the Divine Light Facebook page. Welcome, friends, and let us see what we are studying today. If you like, you can pull out the Gospel According to Spiritism and follow along. We're not reading every single piece of the Spirit's studies, of the Spirit's reports, but explaining it a little bit. So today we will be focusing on chapter 1, item 11, and that will be about St. Augustine. St. Augustine, we know from Spirit's book. We know him also from the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 14, item 9, where he helps us greatly to understand the importance of parenthood and what our duties are. And then we will move on to chapter 2, which is entitled, My Kingdom is Not of This World. And we will be studying item, 8, an earthly kingship. So let us begin with St. Augustine. Item 11 of chapter 1, I have not come to destroy the law. Because if we recall from last week, first Moses came and brought the 10 Commandments to us. And then Jesus came not to destroy the law that Moses established, but to further develop it. And now, and we've talked about the Spirit's teaching, we've interpreted this, we've studied it, and today we will add St. Augustine. And this message comes from the Spirit Erastus, who was a disciple of St. Paul. The message came through in Paris, 1863. And we will be sharing the screen, and we'll also do a little technical test to make sure that technology is as cooperative as we want it to be. So let us see. I have to click a few buttons. All right, and now we're gonna do a little test here on our phone to see whether it all looks the way we want it to look. Let's see here quickly. All right, it hasn't come through yet. And now it's the way we want it to. Let's see, I think it looks good. I think it's lagging behind. Yeah, it's moving. All right, friends, we are in business. And page 56 in this edition of the Gospel. Saint Augustine is one of the greatest divulgers of Spiritism. He manifests himself almost everywhere, and we can attest to that. There's very often a message by Saint Augustine, and he helps us greatly to further understand what the teachings are all about so we can apply them more readily in our lives. We find the reason for this in the life of this great Christian philosopher. Like many others, he was uprooted from paganism, or rather, from the most profound impiety, by the splendor of the truth, when in the midst of his excesses, he felt in his soul that strange vibration calling him back to himself. When finally on his own way to Damascus, he too heard the holy voice exclaim, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He exclaimed, my God, forgive me. I believe I am a Christian." And from then on, he became one of the firmest supporters of the gospel. We may recall that in the book, Paul and Stephen, Saul, who was a lawyer, he was part of the Sanhedrin, a Jewish religion in Jerusalem, and he was persecuting the Jews. And when he went to Damascus with his phalanx of his co-workers, so to speak, Jesus appeared to him right at the gates of Damascus. And he said, "Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Jesus said. And Saul converted to Christianity, to follow Jesus. And we can read this beautiful account of his life in the book, Paul and Stephen by Emmanuel through Chico Xavier. So now we're learning that St. Augustine had his own Damascus experience. He finally released his pagan background, his religious background that wasn't aligned with Christianity, and he met Jesus and he converted. In the famous confessions that this eminent spirit left us, namely St. Augustine, one may read the simultaneously characteristic and prophetic words he uttered after having lost Saint Monica. Monica was his mother. And there he says in this book, the Confessions, "I am convinced that my mother will return to visit me and give me counsel, revealing to me what awaits us in the future life." He was actually foreseeing what Spiritism then came to manifest, that there is a life after life, that there is a future life, and that we can communicate with the spirits. What a lesson in these words, and what a brilliant foresight of the future doctrine, namely the Spiritist doctrine. This is why today, seeing that the hour has come to divulge the truth that he had predicted, he has become its, namely Spiritism's, ardent propagator, and has multiplied himself, so to speak, in order to answer all who call upon him. So he was actually ahead of his times. He foresaw, which wasn't something that was happening to that degree, that one day we will be communicating with the spirits. And he foresaw that his mother would come to him and revealing to him what will await him at the time and all of us, namely the future, our future life. So St. Augustine is one of the greatest divulgers of Spiritism. He's a great Christian philosopher. He was uprooted from paganism by the splendor of the truth. Jesus appeared to him. He experienced his own road to Damascus and heard the holy voice. And now he's one of the firmest supporters of the gospel. To flesh out his life a little bit, we pulled up some information online to help us understand him a little bit more. Okay, hold on. We are looking for the page. Oh, that's the wrong title. But Augustine was perhaps the greatest Christian philosopher of antiquity, and certainly the one who exerted the deepest and most lasting influence. Interesting, right? He is a saint of the Catholic Church. He was born on November 13th in the year 354, and he discarnated on August 28th, 430. So he was approximately 76 years old when he discarnated. He was born where? in Tagaste in Roman Africa, which is today Algeria. His mother Monica, a devout Christian, seems to have exerted a deep influence on his religious development. His father Patricius was baptized on his father's deathbed. St. Augustine's studies of grammar and rhetoric were hoped to pave his way for a future career in the higher imperial administration. And in Carthage, at the age of approximately 18, he found a mistress with whom he lived in a monogamous union for about 14 years, and who bore him a son, Adeodatus. And the son was baptized together with his father in Milan and died a little later at the age of 18. So his son discarnated early, apparently, but was baptized together with his father, who was baptized on his deathbed. In approximately 373, Augustine became a hearer or auditor of Manichaeism, a dualistic religion with Persian origin that in northern Africa had developed into a variety of Christianity and was persecuted by the state as heresy. His adherence to Manichaeism lasted for 9 years and was strongly opposed by Monica, who, as we remember, was a devout Christian. In 383, St. Augustine moved to Milan, then the capital of the western half of the empire. So he moved to Italy. And he became a publicly paid professor of rhetoric of the city at the imperial court. Remember, he had the studies of grammar and rhetoric, which were hoped to pave his way for a future career. And that's exactly what happened. Here, he sent away his mistress. So it was in Milan where the 14 years were completed. He sent away this mistress to free the way for an advantageous marriage, which was a behavior presumably common for young careerists at that time. The ensuing period of uncertainty and doubt, depicted in the Confessions, and Allan Kardec, Erastus mentioned the Confessions as well, which was a book that depicted a crisis in his life and even in the medical sense. And it ended in the summer of 386, when Augustine converted to aesthetic Christianity and gave up both his chair of rhetoric and his further career prospects. So this is when the moment his personal Damascus hit. It was after he wrote the Confessions. He depicted his whole inner struggle, and it was even a crisis in the medical sense. So he must have gotten sick. And that's when he found Jesus. Augustine was baptized by Ambrose at Easter of 387, so shortly thereafter, and returned to Africa with some friends and his mother, who died on the journey in Ostia. And then, 4 years later, in 391, he was ordained a priest in the diocese of the maritime city of Hippo Regius, and his rhetorical skills equipped him well for his daily preaching and for religious disputes. Throughout his life as a bishop, he was involved in religious controversies. Interesting. Most of the numerous books and letters he wrote in that period were part of these controversies, or at least inspired by them. So this gives us a little bit more of a different angle and idea about Augustine, St. Augustine. And then there is an added passage that we want to read, which is a comment that Allan Kardec added to the section that Erastus wrote on St. Augustine, which is the Spirit Erastus. And here is what Allan Kardec says. Has St. Augustine therefore come to destroy what he himself built? Interesting question. Because he went through many transformations during his life, and of course further transformed, because let's remember, he is the strongest divulger of Spiritism. So has he come to destroy what he himself built before this stage? And the answer is certainly not. But like so many others, He sees with the eyes of the Spirit now what he could not see as a man. Because once we shed our physical envelope, our vision becomes less myopic, and we see with greater width what is going on, what the truth is. We come closer to the truth. We're reminded of a section in Genesis, where Allan Kardec explains to us that higher evolved spirits, more pure spirits, are like the man on the mountain, where they can have a better overview of the bigger picture. And for them, there is really no future, because when you're up on the mountain, you see what the man who is on his path towards a certain destination will be experiencing in this man's future. But for the spirit who has the broader view, it is actually already happening. It's already visible. And this is what happened, of course, to St. Augustine, and most likely to most of us. We have a better view, a better sense. We understand things differently. But that doesn't mean that we destroy everything we've experienced before. While on earth, he continues, he judged matters according to the knowledge he possessed. Of course, we all do. But when a new light shone upon him, he was able to judge things more wholesomely. It was thus that he had to change his mind regarding incubus and succubus spirits, as well as the anathema that he had launched against the theory of the antipodes. What is he talking about? Thank God, Allan Kardec gifts us with a footnote. He says about the incubus and succubus, they describe evil spirits, male and female respectively. So the incubus is male and the succubus is female, who lie with persons in their sleep to have intercourse. Wow. So apparently this theory that he had was he changed. He changed his view on that. And then what is the theory of the antipodes? And there is another explanation. The theory of the antipodes is St. Augustine thought there was no reason to believe that humans lived on the opposite side of the earth, walking with their feet opposite of ours. Due to the lack of knowledge of the spherical form of the earth, St. Augustine's opinion was commonly held before science proved it otherwise. So we're always only as good as our consciousness is on planet Earth. We're always evolve. And what seems to be the truth in the moments very often reveals itself to be not so. And then we rewrite it, we change. That is the law of progress. And so what happened to St. Augustine during his lifetime? He had these theories about the evil spirits having intercourse with people who slept, and the fact that people were walking on the other side, with their feet up against ours, and all of that proved to be not correct. And he saw that after his discarnation. Now that Christianity has appeared to him in all its purity as a discarnate, he can think differently about certain points than when he was alive, but without ceasing to be a Christian disciple, because he converted to Christianity during his lifetime, and he still is. Without renouncing his faith, he can make himself the propagator of Spiritism, because he sees in it the fulfillment of things foreseen. As a herald of Spiritism today, he leads us to a more careful and logical interpretation of the texts. The same is occurring with other spirits who have found themselves in a similar position. So there's other spirits like St. Augustine who built upon their lifetimes of knowledge and rearrange and readjust it. Once they have shed their physical shell and have a vaster perspective on things. But that does not necessarily mean, like in St. Augustine's case, that they're not disciples of Christianity anymore. One thing does not exclude the other in this case. So that completes item 11 of chapter 1 on St. Augustine. And hopefully now when we encounter St. Augustine in the Gospel, in the Spirit's book, and other works, Spiritist works, we will understand him a little bit better of where he came from. And thank you, Allan Kardec and Erastus, for bringing him closer to us, which is important. So now we will be moving on to chapter 2. Chapter 2 in the Gospel, according to Spiritism, is entitled, My Kingdom is Not of This World. And let us one more time check in with the what is it called, Facebook, to see who's, there's Mark. Hi, dear friend. Thank you so much for joining. And Robbie, thank you so much for joining too. There's a few more people, so please feel free to say hello, introduce yourselves. It's more fun to study together. And of course, we will also have people on our YouTube channels, both Becerra Spiritual Healing Center as well as Divine Light. So, my kingdom is not of this world. We're very familiar with Jesus saying those words to us, which really change our whole entire perspective, because all of a sudden things make more sense. It's not just this lifetime. There is so much more. We understand where we came from, why we're here and where we're going, and what our duty is, namely to establish the kingdom of heaven in our own hearts, our own souls. So chapter 2, we're going to give a few quotes of the chapter so we can tie in the spirit message that later on we will study and discuss. So the future life. With these words, Jesus clearly refers to the future life. My kingdom is not of this world. These words point towards a future life because it's not of this world, which he presents in every circumstance as the end where humankind will end up. So that's where we're moving towards. The kingdom that's not of this world. And it is the object of people's principal concerns while on the earth. So to establish the kingdom of heaven, which is not of this world, is, according to Allan Kardec, the object of our principal concern during our incarnations. So let us open up to that and really hear that loudly and clearly. This is our principal concern, to look past matter, to look past the vicissitudes of life, to look past everything that we see, touch, feel, smell, and taste on this planet. There is more. And that is wonderful, because what we experience here is not always easy. But to know that we're actually working on establishing the kingdom of heaven, which is not of this world, it's the good news. It's the gospel. It's part of the gospel. So then he says, without the future life, the greater part of this moral precepts would not have any reason for being. So all Jesus's moral teachings would not make sense, would not have a reason for being if there wasn't a future life. Because when we only look at this lifetime, things don't always make sense. Why would suffering make sense if there wasn't a greater reason for that? For example, the future life is the goal of all persons, he says, and it justifies the anomalies of earthly life. It explains the so-called perceived injustice we sometimes see with our myopic view. But that's not the truth. It harmonizes them with the justice of God. So the future life harmonizes us with the justice of God. We understand why we're experiencing what we're experiencing and what the goal is. With Spiritism, the future life is no longer a simple article of faith, a hypothesis, no longer. It is a material reality demonstrated by the facts. Eyewitnesses have come to describe this reality in all its phases. What is he referring to? Why is the future life all of a sudden demonstrated by facts? And why do we have eyewitnesses? Who are those eyewitnesses? that describe this future life to us. It's the spirits. An integral part of Spiritism is mediumship and communicating with the spirits. Our whole entire study is based on the spirits' teachings. That is what he's referring to. We have direct reality TV accounts from the spirit world reporting back to us, helping us to get a bigger and better picture, helping us to understand more and more of why we're here and where we're going and where we're coming from, helping us in our moral advances, in our inner transformation. This is what he's referring to. With Spiritism, the future life is no longer a simple article of faith. It's reality. Thanks to the mediums, the many mediums who give a voice to the many spirits who are here to help us. How beautiful is that? Gratitude is welling up in our hearts. So we're learning as a result of that the corporeal life is no more than a passage. We've often said that a lifetime is but a blink of an eye in the bigger picture of eternity. So here we learn that life is no more than a passage. It's not everything at all. And death no longer has anything terrifying about it because we know how to prepare ourselves. This is beautiful chapter in Heaven and Hell entitled The Passage, which helps us so beautifully to understand the passage from incarnation to discarnation, the transition. How we can prepare ourselves, what mechanistically happens, and the challenges, potential challenges, and how to do our best to avoid them, to minimize them, to understand the whole chapter of discarnation better. And that helps us. The more we know, the easier the experience will be because we will be prepared. Like a traveler, if we travel, let's say, to Africa, we want to know where we're going to go. We're educating ourselves, we're packing a bag. We are ready. We're getting a passport. We're preparing for this journey. Are we preparing for our discarnation? So let us now go to the Spirit's teaching of chapter 2 entitled My Kingdom is Not of This World. And this particular teaching is entitled An Earthly Kingship. Kingdom of heaven is not of this earth, of this world, but this Spirit talks about an earthly kingship. And who was it other than the Queen of France? And this was channeled in 1863. This message came through in 1863 by the Queen of France. So she lived a queenship. She lived a royal life. And now she's discarnated and she's helping us to understand. Beautiful. Thank you for this message. So what is she saying? She says, who better than I can understand the truth of these words of our Lord? My kingdom is not of this world. Who can better understand it than she? Because she lived in a kingdom during her incarnation and she has a better understanding now. Are they the same? I lost myself in pride while on the earth. I lost myself in pride while on the earth. Who then could understand the insignificance of earth's kingdoms, if not I? Are we still admiring the kings and queens of this planet? Do we still feel that British royalty? We wish we were part of them. Here we get a different perspective. What of my earthly kingdom did I bring back here with me? And she's talking about the spirit life. What of her earthly kingdom did she bring back to the spirit life? Nothing. Absolutely nothing, she says. Because any kingship, queendom, kingship that we experience on this planet is transitory. And we know from the Spirit's book, from the Spirits on high, helping us understand that the larger, the bigger trial is to be rich, to be famous, to have a lot of resources. Because why? Because what she says, I lost myself in pride. It is so much easier to lose ourselves in selfishness and pride. It's always easy, but it's even more challenging when we have a lot, when we are the Queen of England, to stay humble and to share of our wealth. And that way, it's the more challenging incarnation, because most likely we forget. And she forgot. The Queen of England is now realizing she made a mistake. She forgot. She was filled with pride, and then she realized she could take nothing, absolutely nothing with her. It was a transitory experience. And as if to make my lesson more terrible, it did not even accompany me to the tomb. I was a queen amongst men. As a queen, I thought I would enter the kingdom of heaven. Such delusion, such humiliation, when instead of being received as a sovereign, I saw above me, far above me, beings whom I had deemed quite small, and whom I had despised because they were not of noble blood. Pride. Right? And of course, you and I are most likely not of blue blood, of noble blood, but we may fall into the same trap. Are we looking down on people? Do we think because they don't have a title or they don't appear to be as intelligent or this, that, or the other, that we look down on them? We don't know. We are invited to be charitable, benevolent, indulgent, and forgiving, and never be prideful. So here she is, she's saying what a delusion. What she saw above her in the spirit life were spirits who she deemed low lives in her past incarnation because they were not of noble blood. Oh, how I then understood the barrenness of the honors and grandeurs that I so eagerly sought on earth. And this is another therapeutic question for us. Are we still seeking honors and grandeurs in our physical incarnation here on earth? She's helping us to get the bigger picture. She's one of those gifts that's falling into our lives right at this very moment, helping us understand that the kingdom of heaven is not of this world. In order to prepare oneself for a place in this kingdom of heaven, self-denial, humility, charity in all its heavenly forms, and benevolence towards all are required. You are not asked who you were or what position you occupied, but what good you did, the tears you wiped away. So now she's giving us the recipe for success. She's telling us, how can we prepare ourselves for a place in the kingdom of heaven? It is through the cultivation of self-denial, which is the antidote to selfishness. Self-denial. We're availing ourselves to other people at their request, or maybe even offering, not always at our convenience. As a matter of fact, hopefully we open ourselves up to help at the person's convenience, the person who needs the help, their convenience. Self-denial. It's not me first. Next thing she's saying, humility. Of course, another antidote of pride. Pride and selfishness always travel together. Humility. Charity, as defined, the moral charity, as defined by the spirits on high in the Spirit's book, as benevolence towards all, goodwill towards all, no exclusions. Indulgence towards others' imperfections, and forgiveness towards others' trespasses. And benevolence, of course, that's already part of the definition of charity in the Spirit's book. So we see they're all connected. It's like a package deal. So how can we prepare ourselves for the kingdom of heaven? We cultivate self-denial, humility, charity, and benevolence. And what is the most important questions? that we want to ask ourselves every day, weaving it into the nightly review that, of course, who recommended to us? Our very own Saint Augustine that we just studied. He said, do what I used to do during my lifetime to get to know yourself better. Do the nightly review. And now we have another ingredient to weave into our nightly review, namely the question, what good did I do today? And the Queen of England, the Queen of France is now bringing this to us. And we're invited to seek our path through the briars and thorns and not among the flowers. So in other words, let's not cut corners. Let us fulfill the duties that appear in front of us. Let us show up. Let us be dutiful, charitable, and not cut corners and look only for the flowers, but let us embrace the briars, knowing that there's a very good reason why they're in our lives. Oh, Jesus, she says, you said that your kingdom is not of this world, because one must suffer in order to reach heaven. And the steps of a throne cannot lead us to it. So being a queen in this lifetime won't help. It could, but mostly it doesn't. And it didn't in her case. Only the most trying paths of life do. Therefore, seek your path through the briars and thorns, and not amongst the flowers. People run after earthly things as if they were able to keep them forever. But here, there are no more illusions. So on the spirit side, she's reporting back, all the illusions fall off. We will see that that's an illusion to run after earthly possessions. Because what are we doing? We're chasing a shadow. We're not doing what we're really supposed to do, which we saw on the other side, namely prepare ourselves for the place in the kingdom of heaven through self-denial, humility, charity, benevolence, and asking ourselves, what good did I do today? They soon perceived that they had only been chasing a shadow and that they had neglected the only possessions that were solid and durable, the only ones they could use in the heavenly home, the only ones that give them access to it. Of course, those are the virtues. And in the Beatitudes, Jesus further helps us understand of how we can establish the kingdom of heaven in our own hearts and minds. She continues and wraps up to say, have pity on those who have not gained the kingdom of heaven. Help them with your prayers. Be merciful. For prayer brings people closer to the Most High. It is the link of union between heaven and earth. Do not forget that. So she says, we're invited, she's inviting us to have pity on those who have not gained this kingdom of heaven yet. Let us be merciful. Let us be benevolent towards them. Let us be indulgent towards the ignorant. And we're not pointing the finger and we're not pointing out there, because we're really speaking about ourselves. Because this is where the work lies, right? This is where the work lies. And in the meantime, we're invited to be merciful, to not judge, to not see the speck in the other's eyes and overlook our own huge plank. That is part of being merciful. And what will help? What is the tool for us to use that she recommends? It's prayer. Help them with prayers, because it brings people closer to God. And she says prayer is the link of union between heaven and earth. The kingdom of heaven is not of this world. Through prayer, we draw closer. We ourselves draw closer to the kingdom of heaven, and we're helping those who are still far away as well. Dear friends, what a beautiful message to soften our hearts, to open our minds, to become more charitable, which will help us establish the kingdom of heaven in our hearts and minds. Let us for a moment, if you can, close your eyes in gratitude for all the gifts that we are receiving nonstop. Sometimes, dear God, we don't recognize your gifts because they feel painful. But we are today reminded one more time to stay in the briars and the thorns, because it is through those experiences that will help shed us our pride and our selfishness, helping us to be more merciful with our brothers and sisters, helping us to understand the bigger picture, shedding selfishness and pride, but fostering charity, benevolence, indulgence, forgiveness, self-denial, and always looking out for our brothers and sisters. We're grateful for St. Augustine, who has been in our lives thanks to his service to mankind, giving messages from the other side, helping us to understand the teachings better and bringing us closer to the practical application of the teachings. And we're grateful to the Queen of France, who is giving us this precious information and perspective that running after material goods in this life, on this side of the spectrum, is like chasing a shadow. So as we move forward, we will stay in a prayerful attitude, connected to you, dear God, to Jesus, to all the good spirits who come out to help us. And of course, our prayers always include everyone who is in need, who is in pain, who is struggling and has difficulties. But our prayers also extend towards those kings and queens on this planet, for them to remember the teachings of the Queen of France. Thank you so much for allowing us to study these beautiful spirit teachings. And with this, we close tonight's study group. Thank you so much, dear friends. Thank you so much for joining. And let us stay connected to God, always looking to be of service. What have I done today to help our brothers and sisters? And if you want to read, just coming in, a few more examples like the Queen of France, you can turn to the Heaven and Hell. There is a case called Lisbeth, and she is one of the suffering spirits. She has the same experience that the Queen of France. Then there's Queen Oran, who is also a suffering spirit, who is giving us similar feedback. And lastly, but not leastly, there is also the Queen of Ode, and she is one of the hardened spirits. So this will help us as a homework to solidify the studies. Thank you, dear friends. Much love. And so God willing, we will see you again next week, same time, same place, with the continuation of our studies of the Spirit's teachings in the Gospel according to Spiritism. God bless you.